How the heck are you guys? I am Fastidious, and holy crap, look at this crazy new hero that is coming to Watcher of Realms. The guy we're looking at right here is named Leikan, aka the Storm's Seal. He is going to be a legendary. He is an ancient exclusive with dual faction membership in the Supreme Arbiters and the Nightmare Council. And as you can see, he is a tactician. It's right behind my head. There you go. He is a tactician. He's going to be the 5th tactician in the game. And this guy is very interesting. If we look at his design here, he is some kind of Chinese dragon horse. If anyone knows the specific kind of creature this is, the kind of thing that Leikan is, and you've got any lore on that or something, let me know in the comments. I want to read up on this because he is a crazy looking guy. And let me tell you, as you might be able to guess by looking at him, he is a pretty crazy kit. He is going to be a beast of an AoE physical damage unit. Exactly how good? We're going to test that out over the coming days. If there's content after you hear his kit and you go through this guide, if there's specific content you want to see him in, let me know in the comment section below. But TLDR, this guy packs a punch. He can obviously move around as a tactician. He has very strong faction synergies with both the Supreme Arbiters and the Nightmare Council. He probably will get some immediate use in content like Matrix. Everything is about Matrix right now. How good is he going to be? We're going to have to see. How good is his kit? You're going to find out right now. I'm Fastidious, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to the channel. Please make sure you are subscribed, like the video, and let's get going.
Fastidious.
Fastidious.
All right, guys, Mr. Leikan over here. Let's break it down. Very interesting kit. It is all based around his signature mechanic called Lethal Judgment. He can spam that move a lot, and it deals a significant amount of damage. It puts out some true damage dots. It is a very strong thing. He also has Execute. He has major AoE. There's a lot in this kit. I want to tell you right out of the gate, he has a very unique, we've never seen it before in this game, Displacement skill, where he can go onto a tile where another melee unit is currently deployed, and he forces that unit to retreat. It is pretty strange. I've already been trying to think up situations you would use this, but frankly, I do think it's really weird. Maybe certain stuff in the arena. It has a very nice synergy with this move over here, his passive Storm Shroud. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves. So let's take a step back and let's talk about who he is. Like I said, he is some kind of dragon horse unit. Clearly, I think based on the facial design and the crazy hair, this is something out of Chinese mythology or Chinese legend. And typically those characters are very strong in this game. It's a Chinese developer after all. Neza, Sun Wukong, Diao Chan, Erlang Shen, the list kind of goes on and on. This guy's no exception. He is super strong. I'd say as a baseline, he's going to be a very good AoE physical damage unit. How much better than that could he be? I don't know. He actually has a lot in his kit that is similar to Neza. Obviously different factions, right? That's pretty interesting, and I really do like this faction pairing. I believe it's the first time we have ever seen the Arbiter Nightmare Council pairing. If we look here, right, I don't think there's anyone else. That is pretty dang cool. Kane is Northerner. Yeah, okay, none of these guys are Nightmare Council, so that's pretty dang cool. And I think a lot of people are going to be excited about this unit. I also want to mention towards the start of this video, it is heavily rumored he's coming up on Raid Up this coming weekend. Maybe it's the weekend after, but more specifically, not with regard to the date, but the kind of banner. I can't speak to this, but I've seen so many rumors that it's going to be an extra special kind of banner, a new ancient summoning banner, which we haven't seen before, like the way it's set up. But I think that's something that's pretty dang cool, something to keep your eye out for. I would assume we'll know if he's coming up on Raid Up this coming weekend, either on Monday or Tuesday, so we'll have plenty of time to figure everything out. Like I said, I'll do more extensive showcases. This video is going to be a guide where we're diving deep into who he actually is, and we're giving a proper overview of how his kit works, what his stats are like, so on and so on. So let's actually start with those stats. You can see I've got an A0 Leikan here, fully promoted, no gear or anything though. Let's actually take this artifact off as well. Let's dive in and let's see what the stats look like. So we can see the HP is enormous. I believe this is the 3rd highest HP in the game. Maybe it's the 4th highest. The only higher I can think of off the top of my head are going to be Cassiel and Jira. They both have the same HP. It's like 31.4k. So he's less than 1,000 off of that. That is pretty dang meaty. The defense is also very good, 2854. Magic res is kind of whatever, but a very cool thing, that attack is exceptionally high. Actually, exceptionally high is a stretch, but that attack is higher than you would expect for an AoE tactician. Kind of got ahead of myself there. Of course, we have AoE physical damage units like Ardia, who just have stats through the roof. But if we think of units like him, and the most similar is going to be Neza, it actually is a pretty great stat pool they gave him. If we look at an A0 Neza over here, you can see his base attack is 5,025. So Leikan is just about 400 higher. That is pretty significant. So yeah, Leikan coming in at almost 5,500. It's pretty dang good. He also has mechanisms in his kit for execute. As I said, this is why I find him pretty similar to Neza. And I think that high attack is going to lend itself well to deleting tons of units. The final thing we have to talk about in his base stats before we move on to the skills is going to be his attack interval. So it's slightly on the slower side. He's coming in at 3.0 seconds. And as you'll see immediately now when we break down his talent, you want him attacking a lot. So attack speed will be important on him. But if you have good gear, or if you just make attack speed a priority, I think getting this attack interval down to like 1.7 seconds or less will not be that hard. It really depends on the kind of player and the kind of gear you have. That is going to be important. For a lot of units like this, typically we see a 2.6 second attack interval. There are some units like Arrogance that are slightly faster at 2.4. All in all though, 3.0 seconds, it's not that much slower, right? So he's still going to be really viable, but I did want to point that out. He's not a typical fighter, obviously, because he is a tactician, but he basically is a mobile AoE physical DPS fighter. So let's get into the skills now, and let's start with learning what Lethal Judgment is, because it is kind of the core of his kit. So Lethal Judgment is going to be an enhanced attack he triggers with some frequency. Sometimes it's a lot more often than others. That will make sense when you see how you can reduce the cooldown of this and how his ultimate works. So with Lethal Judgment, he's going to deal 300% AoE physical damage one time to up to 8 enemies. So that's a real proper AoE, and he also will inflict on all those enemies 2 stacks of Radiant Erosion for 10 seconds. If you don't know what Radiant Erosion is, this is true damage over time, scaling off of the enemy's defense. So the harder the content, the better this is. Aside from Guild Boss 1, where you're not going to use him, the Drake, where the defense is really low, the magic resistance is really low. All other late game content, end game content, the units have very high defense, so getting Radiant Erosion on them, which is going to scale directly off of their defense and then fully ignore all defense and magic resistance, that is a very powerful thing. This is a nice true damage effect combined with a big blast of AoE damage, 300% AoE physical damage, hitting 8 targets. Now let's focus in on the talent. He will trigger as a baseline Lethal Judgment every 12 seconds. However, each time he does a basic attack, he will reduce the cooldown by 1 second. So this is why I was saying attack speed is so important on him, right? The higher his attack speed, the lower his basic attack interval. So if you built him, let's say, pretty fast, so a 1.5 second attack interval, you cut that thing in half, you'd probably need him at about 480 or more attack speed. For that, somewhere in like that 480 to 520 range, so that'd be 380 to 420 additional off of the base 100 attack speed that he has. You could actually trigger a Lethal Judgment about once every 5 basic attacks, right? So if he's coming in with a basic attack interval of 1.5 seconds, 5 attacks would take 7.5 seconds. But remember, each one of those attacks is going to reduce that cooldown of 12 seconds by 1 second. Those 5 hits would make it 7 seconds. It takes him 7.5 seconds to do the 5 hits. That's a pretty consistent trigger. If it's coming in every 7 to 8 seconds, that's pretty dang strong. Next part of the talent. Lethal Judgment will deal 30% less damage to airborne units. So this is another similarity he has to Neza. He can just always be hitting airborne units. However, he is penalized. The damage he does comes from his basic attacks and Lethal Judgment, but you can see in both cases, the damage to airborne units is reduced by 30%. The damage to airborne units is reduced by 30%, right? Deals 30% less damage. So he can do it. He's still going to be able to trigger tons of true damage through that Radiant Erosion, but he is going to be a little bit worse against those units. And he does normal physical damage, right? He's not doing piercing damage. He's not doing magic damage. It is standard physical damage. Next part of the talent though, and these are all basically unique standalone things. This is where he gets his execute. Lethal Judgment, which as we said, basically as a baseline, he's going to trigger every 7 to 8 seconds. It can get better than that. It is going to have the ability to execute enemies with less than 15% HP. So slightly worse than Neza. Neza executes if they have less than 20% HP, but this is pretty cool. And as is the case with all execute in this game, it cannot affect elite enemies or bosses. Let's get into the skills now. Let's pick up with that basic attack we briefly talked about, and we can take this moment to talk about his attack range. It's a pretty interesting, unique range. It's a lot better, I think, than it looks. Basically, he's in the back, and then he has a 3-tile by 3-tile square in front of him. So effectively, for the vast majority of content, this is going to play like a 3x3 rectangle, like the kind of attack range you are used to with a unit like Arrogance when he's ulting, or Zealatu when they're ulting, or Neza when he is ulting. So yes, in theory, if they're directly to his right, directly to his left, they're not in his range, but that's a pretty unique circumstance. It's not so common. So functionally, it is a very strong range. And this range is not like those other units, Neza, Zealatu, Arrogance, so on, where he needs to be ulting to get the full square in front of him. He has this as a baseline all the time. That is very strong. This is also a very strong AoE on the basic. Typically nowadays, when we get units that can hit multi-target, do a proper AoE on their basic, they're hitting 5 enemies. However, he deals damage to a main target and then 5 additional enemy targets around the target. So effectively, this is not a 5x multi-target hitter, it is a 6x multi-target hitter. So it's just 20% more enemies. It's just a positive compared to many other units in a similar role. If we go to the ultimate now, half of the ultimate we're going to come back to, and I hope you understand why. It's just because it has nothing to do with him as a DPS, nothing to do with him dealing damage, outside of some synergy that you're going to see with Storm Shroud. I think it will make sense if we circle back to it once I show it to you in battle. We'll do that in a moment, and then we can break it down. Then the picture will really come together. So let's start with all the stuff besides that. And that in question, obviously, is the interesting displacement effect where he can go to a tile already occupied by an ally, force them to retreat, and then some other funky stuff happens. Let's start with the normal part of the ultimate, though. First off, it is pretty cheap. 800 for how strong this ultimate is very nice. It is also quite a long duration at 30 seconds. He also has a very high initial cost at 700. He is going to have a lot of potential in the arena, particularly AoE arena and anti-air arena. So having him as a unit that can basically insta-ult with a 700 initial cost and 800 ult cost, that's pretty good. So first things first, he can choose to move to an unoccupied ground tile within 3 tiles. So this is a pretty wide displacement effect. He can move around a lot. It's the same kind of movement that Vlad Draculia is able to do. He can also move to a ground tile occupied by an allied hero and force their retreat. That first movement, if he does displace an ally, will reduce their redeployment time, and it will make their next deployments cost lower. Again, you need to see that in action. Let's focus on the final part. This is where the damage boosting and stuff comes in. So within the 30 seconds after he casts his ultimate, so after he does his movement, or you keep him where he is, whatever, for that time, his attack will be increased by 25%. That is a lot. Having a 25% attack boost for a full half a minute after casting this is pretty major. Moreover, every basic attack will now reduce the cooldown of Lethal Judgment, not by 1 second, but by 2. Remember, previously, the baseline from the talent is every basic attack reduces the cooldown by 1 second. For the 30 seconds after you cast his ultimate, each basic attack is going to reduce it by 2 seconds. So let's just break this down with the previous situation. He has a 1.5 second attack interval. He does 3 basic attacks. That takes him 4.5 seconds. However, those 3 basic attacks have now reduced the cooldown of Lethal Judgment from 12 seconds, not to 9 seconds, but double, because each one's reducing it by 2. So it takes it down from 12 seconds to 6 seconds. So effectively, every 4th basic attack, he will be able to trigger the Lethal Judgment. Before, it was taking about 7 to 8 seconds. Now it's going to take on average about 5 to 6 seconds. Depends how you build him, how you use him, how he cycles. You will notice the difference. From my testing, I've noticed the difference. It is a lot of triggers and it is really good. But it gets better because during the ultimate, every time he triggers Lethal Judgment, he triggers it a second time. You can see Lethal Judgment can be triggered 1 extra time when triggered. Not the best phrasing there, but every trigger effectively becomes a double trigger. You're coming in not just with 1 instance of 300% AoE physical damage that is hitting up to 8 enemies, you're getting 2 instances. So that's a lot. you're getting extra applications of the Radiant Erosion. The max stacks of Radiant Erosion is 3, so this basically guarantees if you're hitting the same units, they're all going to be under 3 stacks of Radiant Erosion. This is very strong, and it leads to a lot of damage. Let's go to the first passive now, Wrath of the Earth. Each time Lethal Judgment kills an enemy, he will restore additional rage by 20, and the next Lethal Judgment after a kill has increased damage range. I've been trying to test out what that increased range is. There's no way visually to see it, but I believe he just has further length on his attacking range. So instead of that 3x3 square in front of him, it's like a 3x4 rectangle in front of him. Effectively, it will feel like he has a 3x5 rectangle range, similar to someone like Beelzebub, for example. The strength of this passive, Wrath of the Earth, really does depend upon if he's like your main DPS. If he's getting tons of kills, this really snowballs into itself. It allows him to ult all the time. But if he's like a supplemental DPS and it's not lining up properly, that he's not getting a lot of kills, this will actually feel a little bit underpowered. Then we've got this passive, and this is a great transition back into the funkiness that was part of his ultimate, Storm Shroud. When allied heroes enter or leave the range within 2 tiles of him, the caster, he's going to reduce the cooldown of Lethal Judgment by 5 seconds, so it gets even faster. And temporarily, it increases the damage he deals and that ally can deal by 25% for 15 seconds. That is a very long, very strong boost, right? This has a lot of interesting implications. I think we really need to figure out the best way to be bringing people in and out of his range. It will have synergy, this move, with his weird force retreat effect, but also if you're forcing an ally to retreat, they're not entering the range, but he's making them leave, they don't benefit from the increased damage of 25%. By the way, it says 25. I'm just assuming they mean 25% because here it says damage increase plus 5%. I think this is just a test server typo. This does have a lot of cool implications. Keep in mind that reduction in the Lethal Judgment base cooldown from 12 seconds to 7 seconds, because it's reduced by 5, that lasts for the 15 seconds that the damage boost also lasts. That is the temporary window. So if you can consistently have units, at least to start a battle, entering his range, or he's making them leave the range, or you're retreating them, whatever, you can have Lethal Judgment going off all the time, right? If he's ulting and then he has this condition met, for those 15 seconds, and it's overlapping with his ult, every basic attack from his ultimate will reduce the cooldown by 2 seconds, and now the base cooldown is at 7 seconds. So basically, every 2 hits, he would be triggering a Lethal Judgment. It would take him 3 seconds if he has a 1.5 second attack interval to do 2 hits. Each one of those 2 hits would reduce the cooldown by 2 seconds, so it goes from 7 to 5 and then 5 to 3. It took him 3 seconds to do the 2 hits. I think you get it. He's going to trigger it a lot. Okay, finally, before we circle back to that funkiness with the forced retreats that he can do, with the reduction in the redeployment time, with the cheaper next deployment cost, let's just go over this here. Very standard. He has an arena mastery. His is increased damage, so his damage will be increased in the arena by 15%, so he should be pretty dang viable there. I do wish it was a reduction in his costs, right? He's not particularly expensive. He's like a standard fighter, even though he's a tactician, with a cost of 18. But yeah, if that was -5, -6 costs, and he was coming in at like 12 or 13 costs, I do think that would make him more relevant in the arena, but he's going to be quite strong. Let's go to this ultimate now, and let's touch on that stuff I didn't want to touch on before. So when you move him, and when he ults, he's not just moving, and he's not just getting the increased attack and the increased way in which he can reduce Lethal Judgment's cooldown with his basic attacks. He's not just getting the extra trigger, he also has this funky effect. You can move him onto a tile currently occupied by another allied hero who's on a melee square. If you do that, you force that unit to retreat. Now, why would you want them to retreat? It depends on a lot of things. In general, I think it's weird. However, it will trigger this Storm Shroud passive for Leikan himself. So that's going to be extra damage, and that's going to reduce the base cooldown of Lethal Judgment. The interesting thing, though, is the first time he does that, only the first time he goes to another tile and forces a unit to retreat, he is going to reduce the redeployment time for that ally by 75%. So dramatically. The standard ally in a standard situation where there are no debuffs against you, like in certain boss fights, they're going to have a redeployment time at base of 60 seconds. So he's making that next redeployment 15 seconds. Also, he will have their next deployment cost. So if they're a 20 cost unit, it goes down to 10. If they're a 19 cost unit, it actually goes down to 9. It's pretty generous. They do it in favor of the player. They round up in the reduction. It's cheaper. You'll see that in just one moment. This can only happen once, but it is something, and it is very unique. So I've prepared something here. Let's just hop into battle so you can see it. No one's geared. It doesn't matter. I've chosen to use Erlang Shen because he is 19 cost, and you'll get to see exactly how it works. Let's place Erlang Shen right here. Now we could place Leikan anywhere, but for the sake of it, we'll place him in front of this wall just to show that he can displace through the wall. Now let's throw on 1x, and I want you to focus here. We're currently at 8 costs, right? Now I'm going to move Leikan and put him on Erlang Shen's square, and I'm going to put him pointed up, and you'll see he retreats Erlang Shen. Interestingly enough, though, it counts basically as a death. Normally, if you retreat the unit yourself, you don't do it through Leikan or that unit doesn't die, you get half of that unit's costs back. Erlang Shen costs 19, so we should be getting 10 costs back because they would round it up. We did not get that back, so I think that is kind of a negative. But as you can see, Erlang Shen only has 12.8 seconds left till we can redeploy him. That's because he is reduced. This was the first movement. He has reduced the allies' redeployment time by 75%. And you'll see the next thing, the next deployment cost will be reduced by 50%. That's already going to become clear. You can see instead of 19, it is now 9. So 19 would be reduced by 9.5. They round the 9.5 up to 10. That brings 19 down to 9. So this is cool. I think maybe this could have relevance in some arena situations. I'm going to have to play around with it and think of different teams. All in all, though, I do think it's weird. There we go, 9 costs. We deploy Erlang Shen once again. But yeah, I don't know exactly what I think about this. We'll talk about it a little bit more right now, though, because we're going to wrap this up as we get into Awakenings. So let's get out of this battle. Let's break down these Awakenings. I will tell you, he's pretty close to full strength in terms of DPS, damage, and power already at A0. So I think that's pretty exciting for a lot of players because he's going to be hard to get, right? He's an ancient exclusive unit. If we go to the Awakenings now, you can see the A1. This is pretty interesting. So remember I said that first movement, if he retreats someone, he causes them to have a reduction in redeployment time and a reduction in the next deployment's cost. This makes it so the second movement, he can also have that effect, so he can retreat people twice. Per battle, the ultimate can trigger the allied deployment time and cost reduction 1 additional time. So it's not just once on that first movement, it now does it a second time on the second movement if you choose to do that. When triggered, additionally, it will reduce the redeployment time by 75% and the next deployment cost by 25%. So the redeployment time reduction is the same, right? It's still going to take it down by 75%, so a 60-second unit goes down to 15. However, the next deployment cost on that second movement, it's not as dramatic a reduction. It's reducing it by 25%, not 50. So Erlang Shen at 19 went down to 9. In the new situation, he would go down, I believe, to 14 from 19. So it's good, just slightly nerfed with the deployment cost. The A2 is pretty simple, plus 300 attack. That is nice. That would bring him up to over 5,700 attack. The A3, this is probably his best awakening unless we find some crazy uses for that forced retreat. I'm not ruling that out, but the A3 is definitely strong. When Storm Shroud, that is that passive that gets triggered whenever an ally enters or leaves his range. When it's triggered, it will last another 5 seconds. And remember, the boosts from this are really strong. Is an increase to his damage and the ally, if someone's entering his range, the ally entering his range's damage, and it allows the reduction in the cooldown of Lethal Judgment at base from 12 seconds to 7 seconds to last not 15 seconds, but an extra 5 seconds, so 20 seconds. That's pretty good. The A4 plus 8% penetration, so at a baseline, he's going to ignore 8% more defense. And then finally, the A5, this definitely is great. I guess probably this is his best awakening, but this is going to be very, very hard to reach. Might see it in PvP though. We'll see how good he ends up being. This will increase Lethal Judgment's damage by 120%. That is really significant because at base it's 300%. This brings it up to 420. I mean, that is an increase of 30%. That is like from where it was before, from 300% to 420. Like net, it is boosted 30%. Total damage is 120%. That is really strong. Additionally, it brings his execution threshold up from less than 15% HP on enemies besides elites and bosses. It brings it up to 20%, so the same as Nazal. All in all, there's no way this guy is bad. I already tested him. He's hitting hard. How good is he going to be? I'll have to do some more showcasing. If you want to see him somewhere, let me know in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry it was slightly longer. He's just like a little complicated and a little funky. Also, I really like him, so I thought we could spend some extra time on him. Thank you guys. I've been Fastidious. Share it with your mother, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you real soon. Bye.
Fastidious.